It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, June 14th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is looking at potential draft picks for the 32nd overall pick.
Bring it.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with prospect expert Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. To download, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. You can find our show over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we jump into more NHL draft coverage, Sean Couturier appeared on the Nasty Knuckles podcast and said he went under a sports hernia surgery this offseason to repair his lower ab. Will be ready to go for next season, so he says.
Right. I mean, the tough thing now is when you start hearing about these procedures that were done a month ago, sometimes 2 months ago, and everybody says they're going to be ready to go, a lot of times they aren't. And you have to take that into consideration. So with Sean Couturier, with Risto, with his tricep surgery, that's your best case scenario that they'll be ready. But most likely, maybe Risto, they could foresee missing a little time at the beginning of the season, and that's why they are looking for this extra defenseman, because they kind of wonder what's going to happen. And Sean Couturier could be the same thing. I mean, we'll see if he actually starts the season on time. I think with his surgery, he's more likely to than Risto.
Yeah.
So, but again, now it's just these things are starting to build up with Couturier a bit, and so let's see what he looks like after.
Yeah, got to have those plan Bs
Yes.
for the team heading into the season. Switching gears and diving into our draft coverage for the day, we're looking at 4 potential picks at 32. And with this pick at 32, and again, this is assuming the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup, looking
So
like
far,
it,
a pretty good assumption.
yeah, who knows? But that's where we're at right now. There's so many permutations that could go into who might be available. And when we did our mock draft episode on Wednesday, go back and listen if you haven't to explain our picks there. There were a couple of these guys that we're going to talk about today that just weren't available to us.
Right.
And so we want to make sure we cover that, and then also look at a couple of guys that we passed over for particular reasons related to them, related to who we picked and what we thought of their skill with Ryder Ritchie. And so, there's a whole bunch of different options here of what could happen, right?
Yeah, no question. And some players we didn't put there still because we don't believe they'll even be there at 32. So even if you see my new rankings and you see someone like Stian Solberg on there, don't think he'll be there for the Flyers. So, and I don't think they'll take him at 12. So it's like there's a bunch of players in that grouping too.
Right. So we're trying to get as realistic as possible here with who might be available and who we like, and look at the Venn diagram of that overlap.
Right.
Right.
Yep. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And it's again, we're fishing here. We're on a fishing expedition.
Yeah. So Cole Beaudoin is
Mhm.
a center for the Barrie Colts in the OHL. He's 6'2", 201, and he's like a late first round to mid second round. And most of these guys are late first round to mid second round in terms of their current rankings, which would explain why we would pick them at 32, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think Beaudoin might be a little heavier. I'm going to try and get his updated from Central Scouting if I can, because he came in with some massive guns at the. He put on a gun show at the combine, so
Well,
he's been working out.
yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we want to talk about him today. We did talk about him earlier in the week related to our recap of the scouting combine. And he just came in like gangbusters. He won the aerobic fitness test and the bench press, came in sixth at that VO2 max test, third in pull ups. So, kid has a lot of muscle right now.
He's got a lot of muscle. It's one of these guys where he can do a little bit of everything. He's really good on the penalty kill. I think he's got an excellent point shot. I just don't know if I would take him in this spot. If you took him, it's not a bad pick. It's just I think he might be available for that early second instead. That's my thing.
Right. And I think that on the off chance that Columbus does give up their pick this year to the Flyers, which we have said ad nauseum that they most likely will not, maybe that's a spot where you would pick a guy like this
Yeah.
because it's earlier in the second round than our compensatory pick
Yeah,
that we
he's
have
210 now.
later on. Ah,
So he
all
put on a
right.
good 4.5 on each arm. That's the way I say it.
That is very possible. But as far as his skills go, he's great at puck battles, he's great on the boards, but, what is his overall game look like?
I mean, his overall game is, I think he's third line center. I think he's that guy that you get out there, you want him to rough up the other team. He could score a little bit. He's going to be out on the PK, and he's just that valuable third line center. That's what I think he is.
Right, and all accounts say that, he's fast right now as a skater, but mostly in a straight line, that when
Yeah.
he has to cut, it's just not as good and that his technique isn't there, and that's why he's slower when he has to make cuts.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I look at him as like a secondary scoring kind of guy for a team.
It's definitely, something to keep in mind,
Yes.
but definitely not a lock for a first rounder at
No.
this draft for sure. Despite his strong scoring that he had in the OHL this season, it's not like as good as the top guys, which is why he's lower, but it's still really good. And so that's
Yeah.
why he's a late first round, early second round kind of option. Now, Charlie Elick is very appealing in a lot of ways because he is a right-handed defenseman, 6'3", 198, plays with Carson Bjarnason, our goalie prospect over on Brandon. Now, Brandon was a terrible team this year.
Right.
So how do you weigh that for a defenseman like this?
You just have to look at what his job is. And because his job is to shut down, you just have to look at, does he have all the attributes to be that? And I think he does. Right now, his new weight is 6'3", 202. So he's only gained a few pounds. I looked at him, I think 10, maybe 15's max on him, but he definitely could put on some. And so that's something that you say, all right, shutdown guy. He's averaging, thanks to Instat, we found out over 21 minutes a game. He's good on the penalty kill. He's won 53% of his puck battles. He's a shot blocker. By the way, I'm a right-handed shot, and nobody really went crazy over me when I would play. But this guy, I get it. I also wasn't 6'3", but this I like him. He has a strong stick. Does he take too many penalties? Yes. Could his
Mhm.
skating be a little better? Yes. And so those are the things I have to weigh.
Right. And, a lot of the reports said that he's really good at preventing zone entries, which is really important.
Sure.
And, obviously that's part of his job as a shutdown
Right.
defenseman. Right. And so I think that there's a little bit of risk here. And, somebody took him before us in the mock draft. So that's why we didn't
Yeah.
have a chance to consider him as one of our options. But I think if he is available, he has to be on that list of consideration, right?
Yeah. I think you have to talk about him. I do.
So as far as these two guys, like if he was available in the mock draft, Beaudoin or Elick, if either of those two were available in our mock draft when they got to us, would you have wanted us to take him, Russ?
I forget, who did we take there?
Ryder Ritchie.
Ryder Ritchie, right. I know you said it earlier, but I'm watching 3 different things. I still would take Ryder Ritchie.
Yeah, I think so too. I really do. I think that just the upside for him
Is
is
really
too
high.
much to pass up related to the ceilings for these 2 guys. Not that
Yeah.
they're, not
These
good.
guys are more
It's just
higher floor guys.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's just a choice that you have to make, right? And it's
Yes.
not like right or wrong, it's just a choice, and we went with the higher ceiling. And I think that's the right way to go with a late first round pick, in general, but that's just me.
No, I like
Alright.
to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have a couple more 30-second overall options next, but these guys were still available and we passed them up anyway. We're going to talk about them coming up next.
Hey, Locked On Flyers fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could run the Flyers better than Danny Briere? Don't ask me. Well, your dream could come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Flyers fan, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love this game. Yeah, I played games like this in the past. They're always fun. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable online. Play on the go as you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure you check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today.
Of course, we'll be back next week as we get closer and closer to the draft with more analysis and profiles. We'll have our new weekly poll on Monday. We're going to get to the results of this week later in the show, so stay tuned for that. Lucas Pettersson is an intriguing option at 32nd overall. He is a center, 5'11", 172. So he's not like as big as some of these other centers we've been looking at, but still has a ton of skill. And he plays over in Sweden, has been primarily in the U20 league there, but looks to move up to the SHL next season. He has been pretty successful in that U20 league, but does need to work on the defensive side of his play and his anticipation a little bit, but he is also a great skater with a ton of speed.
Yeah, I looked at him. I spoke to him. I think there's a little bit room to put on some more muscle. Uh, I watched him in the Five Nations. He was playing top line center. I thought he'd look good. Played on the power play, played on the PK. I like the way he worked in the corners. Uh, really good zone entries. Really, really good. Is he a center? We'll see. He could be, but there's things to like here. I mean, there's a good player here.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about him is that he got 57 points in 44 games this past season at the U20 level, but only got into 5 SHL games all season. No points there, but that is what it is. It was very clear he was just getting some
A cup of
sporadic
coffee.
looks, right?
Yes.
So it's hard for me to commit to him without seeing a little bit more SHL action, even at that young age, just because it seems like he's done so well at the U20 level. But is that all? Is the question?
Yeah, I know. I think there'll be some more progression. I think it's fair for you to say that, but teams don't get that unless a guy just, gets skipped over this year, and I don't think he's going to get skipped over. So I'd pass on him in this spot, but a couple other spots where the Flyers draft, I'd have to still discuss him.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a guy you have to discuss if everybody else off your board is already gone. Right? That he's kind of in that next group of players, in terms
Right.
of who you were thinking about.
Yeah, and
But it
they
is
spoke to him, so they definitely have some interest, some level of interest.
Yeah, and that's a part of it too, that the Flyers did speak to him. So there's enough there that it was important for us to talk about him as well. Dominik Badinka is a fascinating case study for me just because he's Czech, but he's played in both Finland and Sweden. Like he doesn't really have a ton of consistency as far as where he's doing his developing and like is he always looking for that next opportunity or is he ever satisfied where he is? That's the question I have.
It's not. I can answer the question very easily. The team that he was playing for went bankrupt in the Czech
Wow.
in Czech. So in Czechia, right? So then he
Yeah.
had to go find another team, and that's what started him on this whole journey. So I get it.
Well, that's fair then. But
Yeah.
it's just like on paper, it does not look
No,
ideal.
that's why we needed to find out, and that's why it's good to find out. And he's a good player. I go as far back as 2022 with him. So I went back and I like to look back at somebody from a couple of years ago compared to now. I think that's when you could look at a progression. It's good. He's a right-handed shot. He takes good angles. He hits. He's an excellent backward skater. That's really one of his high points. I think he at times can pick a corner on a shot, but he's got to have the room to do it. Really good with his breakouts, but I don't see a lot of offensive upside here, at least not yet.
Right. And I think that, if you're looking for a defenseman that's going to have any role beyond shutdown or, beyond defensive defenseman, you have to see some indicators there of some additional scoring. And there just isn't with him at the
Not yet.
moment.
No, everything else is good though. So like, if you took him somewhere in the second or third and said, "Hey, maybe there'll be a little more offense, but everything else tracks," he could play in the NHL. He just might be one of those guys like Zamula was last year, but even maybe fewer points than that. Just kind of like that glue kind of guy. You put him out there, he plays good shifts. He gets the puck up the ice, but he's not going to be a major contributor. So you don't want to do that in the first round. But I'll tell
Right.
you, he thinks he's a first rounder because he told me so.
Well,
So I like
every
the moxie.
right. If you see that level of confidence, I think that that's always a good thing. You mentioned the breakout. He is very good at that. His hockey IQ right now is excellent in terms of
Yes,
reading plays as a defenseman. Like he knows where to be to create opportunities to clear the puck out of the zone.
no
He
question.
can then do it. So that's an incredible skill to have and something important that the Flyers need to have in their system. So we're not knocking him entirely or saying a definite no. It just feels like a little bit of a stretch to pick him at 32.
Yep.
But later, if he's still around, that's where you consider him and maybe the second round pick, depending on who else is still left on the board at that point, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. Uh, I don't foresee the Flyers taking him with the 12th pick. I think that would be way too early, and I just don't foresee them even doing it with the second. But I think he might be in the conversation. You never know.
Yeah, I think that is the key right there. It is interesting because I've seen a couple of mock drafts that have the Flyers picking with that Columbus pick, and I don't know if they feel like they have to do it in their mock drafts
Yeah,
just because it's an option, but I just don't see that
I can't
happening.
imagine
So
with a new coach, new GM, with JD sort of in the background now a little bit more, that they're all of a sudden going to take off a year when they could excite their fan base by taking the first round pick. It just doesn't seem like it would make sense to do that. So I'm expecting them to make it.
right. And so that again leaves the Flyers with the 51st overall in the second round. And I think that's where Badinka is kind of better
Yeah,
suited.
because this Columbus pick will be like within the first 5 or something in the second round, right?
Yes.
And that's a key pick. That's like an extension of the first round. So yeah, I'd be surprised if they were to give that up now.
Yeah, I think so. But there's at least one mock draft out there that has the Flyers taking him at 32. We'll see if it comes to
At
pass. But
32, I'm not gonna go crazy. I wouldn't go crazy.
right.
I might question it, but I wouldn't go crazy.
Yeah, it's a tough pick to make
It
in this
is.
draft in terms of potential to suss out if somebody's gonna make it or not.
Getting that pick, that final pick on day one, we all look at the minute that final pick is made, we all have a list of like 5 to 7 players who we thought should have gone in the first round, and inevitably they're usually gone by the middle of the second.
Yep. Yep, I think so too, but it's a pick that you're gonna question a little bit, but hopefully, have the patience to say, "This kid, whoever it is gonna take a little bit longer to
Yeah,
develop
you
than
gotta
your
know
top
that.
picks."
Yeah, you have to know that.
All right. Well, we've got a bonus pick for you that's a late round option, not at 32 to go over, as well as the poll results of the Flyers rebuild versus the rebuilds going on around the NHL. We'll get to that coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. The superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So, Russ, you wanted to talk about Tanner Henricks,
Mhm.
and he is a right-handed defenseman, 6'3", 194, a Shattuck St. Mary's kid who also went through the Junior Ducks program, currently in the USHL. But why did you want to talk about him, given he's only really ranked in a couple of places?
Well, I mean, the Flyers spoke to him, so that's always a key indicator that, okay, again, a lot of times if I'm out there, I can't ask. There's 100 prospects, right? And I'm probably getting information on, I don't know, let's say I get 55, something like that, maybe 65. I'm going to be using this information, throughout the summer, but I also have to kind of like, time myself. There's guys so that it can be a taxing kind of thing. But I just did happen to ask him because he's a big defenseman, and he said yes, the Flyers spoke to him, and so that made me think, okay, they're probably looking at this guy for one of their later round picks because we know that Keith Jones likes these bigger defensemen, and he tracks for that.
Right, and I think the fact that they did talk to him is a big deal, especially because some of these late round defensemen, like Hunter McDonald, let's
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
sometimes the Flyers get attached to these guys and want to take a risk on them, and
And if I
so
remember correctly, at the All American game, which he played in, I'm pretty sure Jonesy was there with Danny Briere. Pretty sure they both were there too.
that is also an interesting point of note there. He is going to St. Cloud State in the fall, so a good but not great college program, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
pretty solid, but not
Oh yeah.
like the elite of the elite. So,
No, no, but
will
very, very good though. Yeah, I mean, there's
right,
been some really good
right.
players that have come out of it, and the Flyers have drafted some players out of there.
Yep, absolutely. And so it'll be a good training ground for him for sure, and give him a few years to develop before they would consider him turning pro. And that's really all you ask for, right?
Yeah, yeah, he's got the size. He could skate. Uh, I think he's 6'3". He definitely could put on more weight and muscle. He'll do that in college. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like the Flyers want to get more of these type guys. So I'm now, profiling them as I go through
Listen, that's
things.
fair. If the Flyers have a type, we got to talk about the guys that are that type, right?
We do. We would be dumb not to.
All right. Turning to our weekly poll. Always exciting to get to Friday and talk about what y'all out there thought. And some interesting results here, I got to say. So, we asked which NHL team currently in a rebuild are you most impressed by in terms of that rebuild relative to where they should be? at this point. And we put the Flyers in there up against the Blackhawks, Canadians, Ducks, and Sharks because we talked to Shang Peng earlier this week about the Sharks and their rebuild. So included them as well. And by God, you all wanted to give the hometown team a boost. The Flyers, with 54% of the vote, as being in the best shape of their rebuild relative to these other teams. What do you think?
I think it's good that the home fans have that desire and attitude. I think the Blackhawks are ahead of them because I think with some young goalies on the way, you may not see them yet, but the Blackhawks have them. And Bedard and whoever they get for Bedard.
In this
Whether
year's draft,
yeah,
yeah.
it could be Demidov, it could be Levshunov, whoever they're getting. Plus other little things that they have and money that they could spend, I think they're going to try and come out of it quicker than the Flyers at some point. The Canadians, they're a mystery to me, man. I mean, I think they have to try and come out of it this year, but I'm not sure. And the Ducks are slow and steady, and the Sharks are definitely in last place on this. They got that right.
Yeah, so the Sharks came in with 4%. I do think you're right about the Blackhawks. So not only do they have Bedard and a very solid prospect pool, but they do have the 18th overall pick in addition to the
Yeah,
second. So they're going to get two very good players
it's a
in
big draft for them.
this year's draft. And I feel
They
like
have
they have
Korchinski already.
right.
They got some players.
I know the Ducks are a different team, but the Blackhawks do have their ducks in a row here in terms of setting themselves up for success.
Yeah,
And I
Frank
think
Nazar, they got some guys, man.
they got some really good prospects here. I think but the Blackhawks only got 11% of the vote here. Basically, the same were the Canadians and the Ducks at 15 and 16% in these poll results. And yeah, I think you're right about the Habs. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they're getting good prospects in the
Hmm.
process. So it's just, can they put it together and make
Right.
this into a cohesive team? I think is the big question. And the Ducks are, I think, going to be a sneak attack team that they're just going to be bad, 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 and all of a sudden very, very good.
Right. I think it's going to happen one year. Like all of a sudden, their defense is going to kick in. They already have
Yeah.
good offensive players, and if Gibson really never leaves, they'll be that year. I'm not sure when.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is, that they're just going to come out of nowhere some year and make the playoffs, and they'll be like, "Oh, the Ducks are good again. Here we
Right.
are."
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that's just kind of what it is with them. And yeah, but 54% for the Flyers. I do think that the Flyers are ahead of where we thought they would be.
Sure.
So that could account for the vote here. But at the same time, I think, the Blackhawks in particular, and maybe the Ducks to some degree, have a little bit more depth to the plan right now, and
Well,
in depth in
younger depth.
younger.
That's
Yeah.
that's really the key here because the Flyers, we mentioned some of the older players now that are starting to get banged up, and that could, curtail them a little bit. So getting Couturier back last year was a big boost. It may not be as big of a boost this year, right? So that's where the Blackhawks don't really have that issue. They're not waiting on anybody
Right.
to sort of see what they are anymore. They got rid of most of those kinds of players. And they have Seth Jones, who I don't think they're going to trade, but if they were to trade him for Mitch Marner, or if you ever saw Mitch Marner and Connor Bedard together, that might, be a
Oh,
problem for the
no.
rest of the league.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank God. Honestly, thank God the Blackhawks are in the West, because I don't know that I would wanna have them in the East with us. But that will do it for today's show. We will be back Monday with a new poll question for y'all to answer. Excited for that. We'll have our nemesis of the week and so much more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got mailbag questions for us or prospects you want us to cover, let us know on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Find us on Locked On Sports Today, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everyone.